continued, so we can get out of here tonight.
I think we got the commission.
I don't want to do the whole.
If we got
I think a hybrid vote was an end.
got a quorum here on the commission, so we're good. With that, I will turn the planning amendments. I believe that's where we're at.
That is
Over.
level 3 amendments,
Level
that's
three?
correct.
We'll turn it over to you to,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I suggest we do the similar type of approach of providing these in a block. And for these ones, these are all amendments with, a majority of them are just time extensions. So I might make the recommendation that we just go through these, and if you've got questions for the sponsors, we'd bring them up at that time.
I agree with that.
Okay?
Yep.
Another little bit of housekeeping. I've got 2 projects where I have a conflict of interest. Can I pull those out and just skip those and have Jason talk to you at the end of the block on those 2?
Certainly.
Thank
Just
you.
skip them and have Jason come up and take care of those
Okay.
at the
So
relative time.
The first one is the Arapahoe Pipeline. That's a conflict. I'll skip that one and jump to tab M. This is the Casper Zone 2 2015 project. This is a 1-year time extension. Like I said, most of these projects are time extensions, largely dealing with needing to acquire easements, and this is one of those circumstances. We okay to move on to the next one? Okay. MC, the Gillette Madison Pipeline. This again is a 1-year extension, not necessarily tied to an easement, but this project was delayed so that the DEQ could perform some well investigations up and around the area. And so this is a 2-year extension to that project. There are no questions, we'll move on to N. This is the Green River Rock Springs, Sweetwater County Raw Water Reservoir. Again, this is a 2-year extension. This is a project that in 2016, they completed the reservoirs, found during the filling, I believe they noticed some settlement and some leaking. The sponsor is in the process of hiring a new engineering design team to develop bid plans and specifications to remediate the issues with the reservoir. And as I mentioned, this is a time extension.
Brian, come up. So Brian, did we not get that contractor to warranty his work?
Commissioners, Select Water. My name is Brian Seppi. I'm General Manager for the Joint Powers Board. To answer your question, the reservoir ran into settlement issues during the final stages of the testing with the contractor. Many of you saw that during your summer tour a couple of years ago. During the time frame when that geotechnical work was being investigated and the reports were written, some time went on. Then the findings come out, and of course the contractor had some issues with it and disputed them. So that proceeding, that legal proceeding, started. In about that same time, the contractor was having financial difficulties on some of his other projects. Became apparent that he was not going to be able to finish the job. The board negotiated with the contractor and reached a settlement in the spring of 18. Some of the settlement dollars account for work not completed and some of the problem areas.
So you've moved on.
Yes, sir. That's why we need the time. We have now settled with all the entities. We are working with a new firm and working on the contracting stage of that to rebid a new project to complete the work and effectuate the repairs. I guess while I'm up here, I must offer the board's sincere appreciation for their support on this project. I realize we've had to come back a couple times in regards to this. We feel it's a very beneficial project, and we certainly appreciate the support that the Commission and the Select Water has provided.
Ran a good operation there.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the sponsor? I had one, if you just got a moment. The settlement, and I think we viewed that when we were there a couple summers ago. Was that case the engineer or the contractor's problem, or did you ever determine that? Or was it both?
Mr. Chairman, of course, the final legal determinations and the settlement with both those parties contain some language that prevent me from expressing the exact details. But essentially, the section of the levee, it's just the upper portion of the reservoir, about the top 13 or 14 feet. There was some moisture-sensitive soils that compressed upon wetting. So it's that problem zone that needs to be rehabilitated. And then, of course, the damage from that movement needs to be repaired so that the entire pool can be utilized.
Thank you. Any other questions from the sponsor on this issue? Thank you.
Moving on, I need to skip tab 0 and move to tab P. This is the Laramie Northside Tank. This is a 2-year time extension, again resulting from easement negotiations on the project. No questions, we'll continue moving. Tab Q, Lower Norwood Rural Water Supply, another 2-year extension. Again, delayed because of easements, which has also held up the design, waiting for those easements. This is a 2-year extension.
Yes, Senator Anselmi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question for the director is just, as I'm looking at this, I thought it was always 67-33, and so if you could educate me on why Rock Springs, the Green River one is 50%, this one's 71%, the one before that is 67, the usual 67-33. How does that determine for all these three that I've seen in the last few?
I have to pull in some troops to answer that, because I was not here when those were set up.
Mr. Chairman, with regard to the Green River project, when they first came in requesting funding, they had funding assistance so they only requested 50% is my recollection, and I know Brian Seppi is still here or not, is that?
Yes, sir. So the reservoir has multiple benefits. On top of reducing the amount of finished water storage that the board was looking at having to provide out into the distribution system. So in essence, we we're building the reservoir to provide an uninterruptible supply to the plant so that storage out in the system doesn't have to be enlarged as much to account for the plant's interruptions. So it has a blending of storage and treatment benefits. So that funding mechanism was blended at 50.5 from Water Development and 49.5 from the DWSRF. Later, that proportioning got shifted because project costs continued to go up, and ultimately it ended up being about 44% from each of the funding programs and about 12 from the board. So it changed once the project's costs evolved and became known. Does that accurately address your?
Mr. Chairman, thanks, follow-up. It does address this one, but how do we get to 71% on the tab we're on now, which is tab Q versus 67%? I'm just trying to figure out how the changes are, and includes all three.
So, Mr. Chairman, on the Lower Norwood Rural Project, this is a project that was originally funded back in 2015. It had some problems in the design. The well was originally targeted for the Tinsley Formation. They ultimately drilled a deeper well into the Madison Formation. This was a small district. The commission ultimately recommended a 71% grant because of the extra additional costs and the size of the district. It originally was a 67% grant, I believe. That's my recollection. But so again, there was additional cost to drill into the Madison Formation over the Tinsley Formation. And as Kevin Boyce was talking earlier, I think that state statute allows you to go up to 75%. So this particular project, they approved a 71% grant.
Thank you.
Okay,
No other questions?
Pete?
Okay. Next project under tab R, the Riverton Water Supply Project. Again, this request is for additional time. There is a proposed budget increase as well. The extension portion of it is for a year, and the reason for the budget request is because of the amount of time that they've been trying to get these easements. They've updated their cost estimates and are requesting an increase in cost because of the time delay.
No questions? Any of the commission? Proceed.
Tab S, this is the continuing small water project program. This is the funding program for the small water project. The recommended request is for $1 million. And you will see that $1 million is based on a projection, and using the remaining funds that we have in the account of $835,400 would bring the total, if we were to get the $1 million, bring the total account to $1,835,400. You can see on the projection under paragraph 3, the projection for 2020 based on the 2019 application rate is $1,800,850. There are no questions on that. That takes us to the end of the block, so we will have Jason come up and present the two that I skipped, which are tab L and tab 0.
Mr. Chairman, under tab, excuse me, L, this is the Arapahoe Pipeline and Tank. And the request is for an extension of time for the reversion date of 3 years. And again, we've heard this before. The reason for that is it took some time to get the easements, and they had to have those in place before they could apply for their rural development funds. So they just need some additional time on that appropriation.
Thank you. Any questions on that time extension by the commission? Hearing none, proceed.
Mr. Chairman, then under tab O is the Lander Storage Tanks and Pump, 2019. This is to replace 3 existing water storage tanks, install some PRVs, upgrade a pump station, as well as increase water supply to the hospital region and high-pressure zones. And if you recall, last year, we funded design only. Now the town is ready to move on with construction. So they're asking for the additional construction dollars. We previously approved for the design, the $227,800, and then the additional increase is the $3,423,700. All in all, coming to a 67% grant, and they are getting their 33% match from the state revolving fund.
Any questions by the commission? Thank you, Jason.
Mr. Chairman, that brings us to the end of that block, if you would like to do your magic on that block. Unless there
Chairman,
are any more questions.
I move that we approve all level 3 project amendments out of count 1.
Moved by Sheridan Commissioner Little, seconded by Commissioner Wagner. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Our next block, I guess, is
Be the level 2 projects under new development.
Mr. Chairman, if I could back up just a little bit, ask a question. I see we had an appropriation for the small water projects for new development. Is there sufficient money in the rehab account that doesn't need an appropriation to? That's tomorrow. All right,
That's
thank you.
tomorrow. Okay, under tab T, Happy Valley Water Supply. I would like to point out that all of the projects we're talking about in this block, as well as the next block, are projects that have gone through the consultant selection, and consultants have been selected for these projects. With the exception of E2, which is an ongoing project. Consultants on board for that.
Mr. Chairman, just one more thing to add on that. If you recall, in May, we had sponsors come. We worked through all these just like we're doing now. So we've already had the discussion. You've actually already approved these recommendations back in May, which then allowed us to go to the consultant selection. So we're basically rehashing history here. So keep that in mind.
we don't need to vote on it. It's already,
No, we,
To vote on it, but I would
Oh, okay.
recommend that we did just like the last block, and
Okay.
if there's questions of the sponsors, we'll bring them up, but
sounds good.
first project is the Happy Valley Water Supply Project, a level 2. This was contingent for this level that the sponsor become a public entity? And they have been, okay. So if I'm correct, the Happy Valley Water Supply Project is a study to look at sources for the Happy Valley, and one of the aspects of that is communication with the town of Afton to look at a regional connection as part of that as well. The proposed budget for this study is $59,000. The next project under tab U. Skyline Improvement and Service District Water Supply Project, Level 2 project, proposed budget's $93,000. The district has recently self-funded a reconnaissance level study evaluation to install fire flushing hydrants and commission a leak detection survey. They've completed work within their noted EPA sanitary sewer surveys, but it is clear that additional upgrades are needed. So the vision of this funding request is to provide a review and master plan for the district that includes well water pumping capacity, an optimal storage system, an enhanced delivery system, and perhaps looking at variable frequency drives on their pumps. Moving on to tab V, as in Victor. This is the South End Water Users Transmission Project. This is a Level 2 project. Proposed budget, $142,000. And this project is to determine the feasibility of extending the South End Water Users water line to allow approximately 25 new users into the district who currently haul water. Project will also look at remedying dead-end lines. Mr. Chairman, that is the end of that block, if you'd like to make a motion.
I have a conflict of interest, so can we vote on all of them except Happy Valley and do Happy Valley separate? Thank you.
Do the other two,
Thank you.
if someone wants to make that motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the director's recommendation on Skyline Improvement Service District and South End Water Users.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Little, seconded by Commissioner Geis. Is there any question, any comments? If not, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
And now, Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the director's recommendation on the Happy Valley Water Supply Level 2 study.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Sheridan Little, seconded by Commissioner Geis. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Next block, I guess.
Suppose we continue in the same manner and just jump right into tab W.
Yeah, I think the same manner is good.
And again, all of the, as I mentioned, all the projects, consultants have been selected. First project is the Bridger Valley Regional Water Master Plan for a proposed budget of $100,000. This would be a Level 1 Regional Water Master Plan. Moving on to tab XYZ, the Cody Water Master Plan, proposed budget $205,000. The City of Cody operates 2 water distribution systems, the first for treated water and the second for raw water. And this is a master plan to update their 2009 master plan that would analyze both the drinking and raw water systems.
Cody Water Plan, Park County.
We got more to do. Jerry?
Yeah, we got some more. There's about 6 more.
Oh. Okay, I won't rush it then.
Okay.
Let me do that. Next project is the LaGrange Water Master Plan. Proposed budget, $114,000 for a Level 1 master plan.
Any questions on LaGrange? Not, we'll proceed.
project under tab B2, Lower Shoshone Watershed Study. This is a level 1 study, proposed budget $231,000. This is investigating sediment in the reservoirs within the watershed. And then part of that would be a sediment management BMPs to develop that and study the watershed.
Any questions?
Tab C2, Pavilion Water Master Plan, a level 1 master plan project with a proposed budget of $135,000.
No questions, we'll proceed.
Tab D2, Pinedale Water Master Plan, proposed budget of $172,000. This is a master plan developed largely because of the EPA indicated that the town would either need to implement filtration, conduct a watershed study, or develop an alternative water supply source. So this is the master plan to satisfy those requirements.
Questions?
I will skip E2 because of conflict. I'll introduce F2 and let Jason quickly introduce the Sheridan. So under F2, the Shoshone Water Master Plan, proposed budget of $157,000. It's a level 1 master plan for the Shoshone Water.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman, under tab E is the Sheridan Municipal Watershed Wildfire Hazard Mitigation Assessment. And we spoke about this, I believe, yesterday and again this morning with the amendment to that existing contract with Anchor Point. This is just simply to add to the assessment that was done for Sheridan and SAWS Joint Powers Board and expand that so we cover the area of municipal sources for Dayton and Ranchester as well. And we're estimating that cost is going to be $120,000. So we'll ask for that in this legislative session, and then if that's approved, we'll amend that into Anchor Point's contract next March.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions? Before we vote on these, I guess I would just like, if we have a review on how many dollars are we talking about in this level 1 section of projects?
Total dollars.
Total dollars.
The recommended projects total $1,234,000.
Thank you. Okay, it's on the other sheet.
Wherever you got that.
I'm reading off the old. But thanks. With that, if there's no questions, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we approve the level 1 projects.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Gluck, seconded by Rodney down here. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Same amount.
Mr. Chairman, the next two projects are the University of Wyoming Office of Water Programs and the University of Water Research Program. And Mr. Greg Kerr is here to talk to us about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, members of the Select Water Committee, my name is Greg Kerr. I'm the Director of the Office of Water Programs at the University of Wyoming. I'm here today to present two items as the Director mentioned, tabs G and H. The first one is the Office of Water Programs. The second is the Associated Water Research Program. As I was sitting in the audience, I was looking around and I thought back that almost 20 years ago, I presented the same thing to the commissioners and Select Water. A lot of faces have changed over that 20-year period. At that time, Senator Geis was kind of leading the show for the Select Water. Also during that period, Mike Purcell kind of came and went a couple times. I think some of the other people that were around during that period, Representative Blake, and also Senator Driscoll was around, I believe, during most of that time.
His cohort came with him.
But back then, yeah, his cohort came with him, yeah. Back then, they had the coveted name, these people that were around for a long time, of water buffalo. These were the old water buffalo that made the decisions on water in the state of Wyoming. It was kind of a coveted name. And after almost 20 years, I look at myself and I say, where does that leave me? I kind of feel like an old buffalo sometimes, but I don't know. Anyway, it was just kind of an observation, but I wanted to thank you for your support for the Office of Water Programs and the Water Research Program over those time periods, and it's much appreciated, and a lot of people appreciate your support. So first of all, the Office of Water Programs under tab G. The actual focus and charge of the Office of Water Programs has multiple facets, but it really boils down to the charge is to work with the Commission, the Select Water Committee, the Director of the Water Development Commission in identifying water-related issues in the state of Wyoming so that we can gather information through research through the University of Wyoming so that we can be better informed of some of these issues that occur. To you folks, what you're looking at today, a lot of these projects and the issues that occur, so you can make better informed decisions with information that we can obtain through research. We have a cooperative program, meaning we work with the state of Wyoming through the Water Development Commission, Select Water. We work with the federal government through the USGS and the National Institutes of Water Resources and the University of Wyoming. So that cooperative group, through that we can work with the Water Research Program in identifying research needs, getting faculty members to train students in areas of water, and at the same time try to solve some of the problems or provide information on these issues that we have, not only in the state of Wyoming, but the region and the entire country. So in a nutshell, that is the Office of Water Programs. Does anyone have any questions on the Office of Water Programs?
Any questions from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to point out that the proposed budget of $175,000, that is to fund the program for the biennium.
That includes both of the programs, correct?
No, that is only for tab G.
So when you look at,
So H2, which is the water research program,
right,
that is to be determined. We're still trying to prioritize the projects that would be developed and instituted under that program.
answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, then secondly, under tab H, is the Water Research Program. And most of you are familiar with the Water Research Program. If you look down at the table that's listed on a timeline of how we operate through the Water Research Program, you can see that we solicit research topics and draft a RFP. That RFP was presented to you, both Commission and Select Water, that you voted on that RFP and the topics and issues within that RFP. And that was approved on May 17th of this year. From there, we move on to, I release that RFP on campus to all faculty members interested in water. And that was done actually earlier than the August date that was on here. Tried to give faculty a little head start on looking at topics, so it was released actually the end of June. And then an update release was also done in August. Then on October 1st is when research proposals, we had a deadline October 1st, and research proposals were submitted to the Office of Water Programs. And at that time, we start our review process. So if you recall, and for those that don't know, we have a review process. Our Water Research Advisory Committee gets together, and they look at all of the proposals. This year, we received 7 proposals from the RFP. Those are currently in review. That review will end tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll get all of them in tomorrow. And then the committee meets on the 21st. So next week, they'll meet, look at all of the peer reviews from external sources and their own peer reviews and reading of the proposals. From that, they will rank those proposals. Then that ranking will come back to the Select Water and Commission in January meeting. This is why we have to be determined listed on the proposed budget. So after projects are selected, then we'll total that amount, and that will go ahead and be placed in that budget area, the amount in the January meetings. So what we have on the continuing pages are the 7 proposals and their associated non-technical statement of relevance. So it can give you an idea of the projects on a layman's terms, hopefully, so you can get a better idea of what faculty members are proposing on these particular projects. We've got some good projects this year, good proposals. We have 3 proposals that are related to groundwater, which is directly from our RFP. We received 2 proposals related to algal blooms, hot topics in the state, as all of you have probably seen last summer. And then we received 2 proposals that deal with water supply and runoff. So some excellent proposals. This is for your viewing. If you want to see the total proposal, those are also available online. If you would contact Jody Pring, who is the project manager, she will give you a URL to be able to look at those. The reason we did not list those directly in here, the direct link for the proposals, is because we kind of had a problem when we did that last year. One of the PIs that was not funded considered his proposal proprietary information within that proposal, and somehow that proposal ended up online somewhere, and a colleague of his found it online, and he was afraid someone else might be able to take his idea, write another proposal somewhere, and go on. So we did it this way this year. So if you do want to read the full proposal, you're more than welcome to, but please contact Jody Pring, and she will allow you to get into that site. So this is for your information only right now. After we receive the rankings, and in January, we'll look at the proposal rankings and hopefully decide on projects to fund for the next biennium, or next year. Thank you. Be happy to answer any questions.
A question. What would be the maximum and what would be the minimum amount if you picked out if you done your selection already?
Total amount, Mr. Director, total amount, do you mean, for projects that
Don't you
would be
select certain
available,
ones? Don't you
or-
select certain ones out of here?
So the amounts are listed for individual projects. See those amounts for individual projects? So in the past, we haven't had a specific amount. We used to kind of work off of a ballpark of a total of 400,000 annually. So a combined amount around that 400,000 is what we've usually worked with. In the last few years, we've been under that. With some of these projects, if we went over, I would hope that the Commission and Select Water would feel necessary to, if the projects felt they were that important, we could fund over that amount. But that's kind of a ballpark total that we've worked with in the past.
Thank you.
I guess I have a question on this program, at least the last one on your proposal. Do the University of Wyoming students support or have any input in you developing these projects, or in other words, the engineering firm, any part of the university student section?
Mr. Chairman, the student involvement, if you can see on the first page of the water research program, we have really three focuses for the water research program. That is to support and coordinate the research, and we do that through student help, graduate students, undergraduate help. We train young scientists in the water-related fields so that hopefully they'll stay in the state of Wyoming and work as you folks do in the water areas. And then our third focus is to disseminate the information we've received from these research projects to people, stakeholders, and people that can use them, consulting firms, anyone, government agencies. So the training of the students is where the involvement is in the projects. So faculty would develop the proposals based on utilizing students to be able to help perform the work.
So there's no outside at all engineering or services that you use to go along with your student faculty as far as the implement is concerned?
Mr. Chairman, not only in a direct way, if an individual PI determines that there is certain expertise, say in an engineering firm or someone, they can involve them in the proposal itself and the project. But as far as developing the proposal itself, there probably is not any direct relation. And these are research projects only. They do not compete with consulting firms. They're not consulting projects. They're strictly research.
Thank you. Any other questions by the commission?
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Not related to the funding, Mr. Kerr. You mentioned that you're training the students. I'm aware that we have several flying the cowboy flag out west that have come through the UW program. Have you ever checked on the numbers of who's staying home in Wyoming?
We do have, Mr. Chairman, some numbers on total students trained, but it's really difficult to keep a number on what's available in Wyoming because there's so many departments involved. We have total numbers of who's trained, what areas they're trained, but I probably don't have the numbers of how many are actually staying in Wyoming. However, I can tell you, every meeting that I attend, and even yesterday, I had students come up to me and say, "Oh, do you remember me? I was under the program back in such and such a year." But every meeting, I have people from around the state of Wyoming, just about every area of the state of Wyoming, that there's at least a few graduates that work through this program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Dan? Yeah, I think it's a great program as long as, if it does what we're doing with it, educating our our students and giving them some work to do. And is there credits that they achieve from these programs also?
Mr. Chairman, they actually receive a degree. If they're master's students, they'll receive a master's degree funded by projects that they work on in this particular program. Undergraduates also receive funding working through, and a lot of them become interested in water by having part-time jobs on projects, and then they continue on and become graduate students working for other faculty members. So definitely.
Good, thank you. I enjoyed the program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That is that block, if you'd like to
Okay.
move on it.
We'll entertain a motion if there's no additional questions.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we fund the UW Office of Water Programs and the UW Water Research Program as have been presented.
Question. How can we approve the second without knowing the amount? The 2DB2, under tab H. Jody can tell us. There's no dollar. There's no money.
I think we reapprove it, sorry, Mr. Chairman. I believe we reapprove this in January when we do have a dollar amount, so this is just kind of a preliminary approval, and then we go back and rehash it in January when we do the final approval of the bill, is the way I believe.
Thank you.
Work. Okay, the motion was made by Commissioner Yankee, seconded by Commissioner Cayley. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Mr. Chairman, I'm bringing the brains back to the table. Jason is going to talk to us about the funding requests for account 3 level, all levels.
That's a stretch, Brandon, that comment, but I'll take it. Okay, so under tab I is where we start account 3 projects. And the first one is Alkali Creek Reservoir. So if you recall back in March, when we had the snowstorm, and I think a couple of commissioners made it down to Cheyenne and everybody else was on the phone, we talked about Alkali Creek and some of the information that we had received at the time. So this project goes back to about 2008 when it was first brought to the Water Development Office from a man named Cecil Mullins, who lives down by Manderson, who has since passed away, unfortunately. But he was a visionary and saw that they needed water over in that basin and came to our program to see how we could help. And we worked through our process in the dam and reservoir program through the feasibility analysis. We've actually started with a watershed study to figure out what we could do for conservation and improving the watershed function and all that stuff. And then moved through the feasibility analysis. In 2015, we put together our original estimates, and then in 16, we brought those forth as a recommendation with some inflation involved, and then going into the 17 session, we asked for a grant and loan for the Alkali Creek Reservoir. So getting back to my initial point of where I was starting was back in March, once we, I'm going to jump around here and I apologize. So once we finish the feasibility study, then we get into the permitting and design. And as part of some of that design work, we go and we do geotechnical investigation. Now, we did a little bit of geotechnical investigation and feasibility analysis to determine that there were no fatal flaws, but it's pretty coarse considering the level of analysis that we're in at that time. So then we put more effort forth on that when we know we've got a good project to move forward with. So during this final geotechnical investigation, they came across some materials for borrow to build the dam out of that were significantly weaker than what was originally thought in the feasibility studies. And I mentioned that in March and said we were going to go out and do some additional testing on those borrow materials to make sure that our lab results were accurate and we felt comfortable with it. And also the foundation conditions during that initial final geotechnical investigation showed that the foundation was much more complex than we had thought back in the feasibility study when we did kind of a cursory geotechnical analysis. So we've gone through the additional geotech now after we've discovered the more complexities and got a better picture of that. And what that has resulted in is, as I mentioned, we confirmed that our borrow material was indeed weaker than we originally were planning. So what that has created is a situation where we can't build as steep a slopes on the dam as we originally thought. They'd have to be brought out quite a bit, which then adds to the material and the quantities and the costs. So we looked at other alternatives, and what it led us the path down was now we're looking at a gravel shell instead of a homogeneous clay embankment, and the haul distances are a little farther, so that's increased cost. And then in addition to that, foundation, we confirmed, it's fairly complex. We originally were going to cut off some of the seepage with bentonite clay blanket, and now we've realized that we need to do some grouting. So those have increased cost as well. And then during that time, we also, I guess with going from a feasibility analysis, now getting further into the final design thought, and considering the construction environment we're in today. I think we've heard it several times yesterday and today about how costs have been gone up and labor shortages and things like that. So we had our consultant put together a new cost estimate, and some of the increases were attributed to what I already mentioned, the borrow material going to gravel, longer haul distance, kind of a change in design of the construction of the embankment. Riprap, we have better estimates on what that's going to cost. There's not riprap on site. We have a significant haul distance to get riprap to the Alkali Creek Reservoir site. Structural concrete costs, we increased unit costs on that. We were originally using $700 a cubic yard. Now we're getting quotes of $1,300 a cubic yard. So I think that's attributable to both steel and labor and various things, steel tariffs. We went to instead of an inclined intake that we have out at High Savory Reservoir, if anybody remembers what that looks like, we went to more of a tower intake because it better suits the site. And having dealt with High Savory for the past 12, 13, 14 years now, we realized that, hey, it's a good design, but it could be improved upon, and there's a lot of maintenance associated with that type of outlet. So we made that change as well on the design, and then various other cost increases associated with NEPA, and we're diverting water. So I should say that in 2015 was when the Water Development Commission, and I know we've got quite a few new faces since then, but we went on a tour out in the Bighorn Basin, and we looked at Alkali Creek Reservoir and Levitt Reservoir and met with both those districts at that time. But Alkali Creek Reservoir is being filled by existing ditches that we're going to modify that divert water out of Medicine Lodge Creek and Paint Rock Creek. And so in analyzing those further, we found that there's significant seepage in certain areas that require lining to drop the water down into the reservoir without being erosive. We've had to add riprap and various other things. So you can get the point. There's been a lot of things that have changed or cost increases since the feasibility study and that original estimate. And then in addition to that, as we talked about earlier with Commissioner Glick, we then add contingencies. So we feel like we've got enough money going into the bid process. So you take a cost increase and then you add contingencies onto that, and it just keeps inflating. We currently have, so I'll get to the recommendation here in a minute. This reservoir, again, it's 8,000 acre feet, and we've got a 2,000 acre foot minimum conservation pool that's been presented and planned for a number of years, ever since the beginning. And the district has gone out, talked to landowners that have access, and that would be within the service area. They've got 33 shareholders currently signed up, and that covers the active irrigation portion of the reservoir, so they feel like they can pay for the loan the way it is currently. They've got enough shares put forth. But more importantly is the acreage associated with those shares, and that's about 13 to 14,000 acres that reservoir can serve into the future. And this is a project we've estimated based for benefit cost ratios, and I'll get into that in a minute, but 50-year life, most likely it's going to be a 7,500 plus year life. So getting to the recommendation, back in 2017, I think I mentioned we asked for $35 million on this project, and it was a 94% grant, 6% loan. And the way we determined that was a lot of discussion with the district who are here. I should have pointed those folks out originally, who made their way down from Manderson, Worland, Hyattville country. They basically surveyed themselves to figure out what were they willing to pay and able to pay based on their operations. And what they determined was the best they could do was a $24 an acre foot assessment, which considering alfalfa and the things that grow up there, that's a pretty significant investment. And that's what broke down to the 94.6. So what we're proposing is the cost estimate now is at $59 million, so an increase of $24 million of what our original cost estimate was. And I've made a commitment to these folks all along that if the cost goes up, we realize that your ability to pay doesn't go up. It's the same as it was before. So what I'm proposing is that we take that $24 million, it needs to go towards a grant because they need to stick with their $25 an acre foot assessment. And that covers not only repayment of the loan, but annual operation and maintenance expenses because they're going to be required to own and operate this structure for the life of that structure once it's built. I also would say that we're hoping through final design that we can find some value engineering and decrease these costs. There's no guarantees of that, but that's always the goal when you go through the final design and putting plans and specs together. And we've got a good board of consultants that was pulled together as part of that final design contract, so there's a lot of smart people working on this or will be working on this. So then that takes me to, I guess, the benefit costs. And currently using a 1.5% discount rate, again, we're talking $59 million is the current estimate. And if you look at the direct benefits of the additional crops and tonnage that's going to be created from this or grown and harvested, and then look at the indirect benefits of that direct benefit, which using Department of Commerce numbers, it's usually a 1.63 multiplier. And then looking at recreational benefits of that minimum pool. And in addition to that, we're taking credit for a small portion of the construction benefits because we'll have local materials in some instances. We'll have labor force that's going to either be employed there or need to find housing or rental space or what have you, eat at restaurants and everything else. So the entire benefit, direct and indirect recreational benefits, et cetera, is $133,728 and change. So that equates to a 2.27 benefit cost ratio, which is significant. And of that, if you just look at the public benefit itself, the public benefit is $92 million, almost $93 million. So well over what we're asking for, well over what we're asking for in grant. And I would also say those are the benefits that are easier to equate and put numbers to. And there's many more than that associated with stream benefits, riparian benefits, fisheries benefits. I could go on and on. Just keeping families in business over time and being able to pass that ranch down to their next generation. And there's not, when I say shareholders, and maybe I say one, but I think everybody knows a ranch has many folks that they employ, especially bigger ranches, and many family members that are dependent on that ranch. So it's not just a share as one person, it's multiple people. So with that, I would ask if there's any questions, but I also like to give the opportunity for the folks that made their way down to Casper today to talk as well, if you have questions for them.
Mr. Chairman, just real quick, and I know it's in here, but I'm trying to find it. How many acres is it anticipated to serve underneath this reservoir?
Roughly 13,500 acres that have access to that water.
Thank you.
13,500.
I do have a question and a concern. When you look at, I guess, page 4, you look at balance and repair and replacement fund. To date, it doesn't indicate that there's any. And why would that number be?
Mr. Chairman, so the Knollwood Watershed Improvement District was formed specifically for this project. They haven't been in operation since 1980, or anything like that. I would anticipate, we haven't specifically discussed this, but we've discussed this on the Levitt Reservoir project, is that once we get the go-ahead from the legislature and hopefully you folks today, we've got 2 to 3 years before we actually start construction to get through final design. Levitt Reservoir, which I'll talk about in a minute, is about probably a 2-year time frame. And so the plan would be for them to start assessing themselves this $25, or in this case, $24 an acre foot, and build that up before they're actually paying for their loan.
Makes sense, and that's what I'd like to see, because that's an important element, I think.
It doesn't make sense to start building it up till we know we're going to move forward with the project.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you.
Chairman, if I could, I'm John Joyce. I'm the chairman of the Knollwood Watershed Improvement District, and we have quite a few members of the district and members of the board here today. They came down for this project. This is a very important project for our area. We have no other storage, so our late season water is determined by the snowpack melt off in the Bighorn Mountains, which some years it lasts and some years it doesn't. So this is important for us. We look at this, Jason, I know they do these numbers, the standard cost-benefit ratio goes off of a 50-year plan. We look at this as a much longer program. We've got farmers here today, not all of them could come because some of them are still digging beets, unfortunately. It's been a tough year. Our newest member of the district, Royce's daughter, wanted to come real badly, but she's only a week old, so she couldn't make the trip. So we really think of this as not just us sitting in front of you today, but generations in the future. Most of these farms and ranches in this area are multi-generational, and hopefully they'll continue to be that way if we can get a little better commodity prices going here. So we really appreciate your time considering this, and we understand this is a great deal of money, and we, of course, think it's worth it, and I hope the rest of the state does also. There's a $15 million benefit right off the top during construction that comes back in the way of wages and other cost-related or construction-related expenses. So I feel confident the state will benefit from this project, but with this cost increase, it's going to be a little longer payback period. So we have worked closely with Jason, and we really appreciate the work that Jason's done and the rest of your staff has done, and the commitment that you've already made. We have agreed to take over ownership of this. We do plan on operating and maintaining it, and in that $24 an acre foot, there is money set aside in there for Larry's comment for an operation and maintenance, as well as a reserve fund for repairs in the future going forward. So as soon as we get a little farther along in this process, we'll start the assessments and we'll start building that fund. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. We've got our engineers here also, and we've got quite a bit of experience that came down with us as far as the agricultural industry in our area. So any questions you have for us, we'd be happy to entertain them.
Senator Hicks, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick question, and I see that you're a watershed improvement district, and I'm curious, given all the options of looking at either an irrigation district or a water conservancy district or a watershed improvement district, all of them have different governance mechanisms. Is this just for my edification, why was it chose to go the route of forming a watershed improvement district? Because there's a couple layers of additional stuff there that you have to go through. So I'm just curious as to why you went that route.
Mr. Chairman, that's very true. And when Mike Besson was here, and we worked with him and Jason quite a bit on choosing whether we were going to be an irrigation district or a watershed improvement district. And not all of our district will benefit from the reservoir. There's many acres in the district that won't. And so we thought there's other projects and programs that we would be able to apply for money for or orchestrate to the benefit of some of the higher ground, some of the ranches and dry land pastures that we have in the area. So we thought for the whole drainage, this would be the most beneficial entity to form.
Right, that makes sense because your boundaries are far other than just the irrigated ground. You're looking at all the, and that would probably be the most appropriate mechanism. Thank you. That clarifies that.
I'd also add real quick, if I could, Mr. Chairman, and I alluded to this earlier today when we were talking about amendments to NEPA contractors. For Alkali Creek, again, we've gone through the NEPA process. We have a final EIS that was completed back in May, and we've got favorable record of decision from the BLM and a right-of-way permit to construct this. We just need to sign it. The compensatory mitigation plan for wetlands, we were holding off on that because we didn't want to spend money in advance of getting a commitment from the commission and hopefully then eventually the legislature. But as soon as we get that commitment, we can finish that up, and by middle of next summer, I would expect we would have a 404 permit in hand as well. So we've put a lot of resources towards this project. We've navigated the NEPA process, which is not a simple thing to do these days, and pretty much have permits and can move on it. I also say that one of the things that's hard to quantify when it comes to benefits is by completing this project, we're putting Wyoming water to beneficial use. It's not going to Montana anymore. And we've got more water to appropriate in the Bighorn River that Wyoming has its name on. So, and then the last thing I would say is, even though that we've had a significant cost increase here for Alkali Creek, it's still very well in line with Levitt Reservoir, which we'll talk about here in a minute, as far as the cost per acre foot.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on your membership. So you could have somebody buy 100 acre feet, is that $24 charged every year on that amount, even if they don't use it? And is there a charge if you do use it, maybe?
Well, Mr. Chairman, that your first scenario is correct. The $24 an acre foot would be charged every year, regardless of whether the water is available to use or whether it's there and you don't use it. You would still pay that amount. So that would cover all of our fixed costs, loan repayment, the operation and maintenance, regardless of how the water gets used. And if we have a severe drought going and we can't fill the reservoir, unfortunately, you would still pay the $24 an acre.
Follow-up. Is there a set amount that you're requiring? I mean, if you have 1 acre, you're supposed to buy 3 acre feet or not necessarily?
Mr. Chairman, I think we did. Did we set a 5 acre? I'm sorry, I can't remember now, but we don't have anybody less than 5 acres, and I think we did set a requirement that you have at least 5 acre feet.
Point here. Mr. Chairman.
Representative Eklund.
I have a few questions, I guess. So I think you answered the first one. This storage doesn't have to be shared with any other state. Wyoming puts it in and all the water that's appropriated there, none of it's stored for Montana. It's ours. Okay. Follow up. Well, we're on this project. It has to do with the other ones, and the reservoir projects that we've got. This is a 70% increase. Are we kind of expecting that to happen with every one of them as we navigate through? And I know the difficulty of the process. We're probably going to spend more money on the regulations and garbage that go with it than we are construction. That's the way it's kind of been, but are they all going to be that way?
Mr. Chairman, I would hope not, if that's the case.
Okay.
Brandon will probably be looking for a new deputy director. But
Yeah.
typically, we like to be conservative on the front end and high, and then bring those prices down as we refine designs and all that stuff. This is just how this one worked out, but I would not anticipate that on every other project we're working on.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman? So we're in an amazing anti-tax climate, and we're watching revenues fall. We're working with, I think it's about $500 million per biennium shortfall, and every time you try to raise revenue and just the tiniest amounts for anything, it's painful. It's like pulling teeth. Anyway, and I think you're kind of aware of it. This one is just, from the get-go, is a great project. I'm not criticizing it at all. I'm just wanting you to know what challenges the state has. One of the reasons this is a good one is because of what you can raise. Another reason it's a good one is because the only way your district has operated through the years with the water shortage you have is by a lot of unselfishness within the district, and the way the irrigators have operated. The senior rights holders have really operated in an unselfish manner, and this is a good one to fund. I'm a little alarmed by the 70% increase in costs that's happened, and I guess the message that I would like for people to hear is that at some point in time, minerals isn't paying all the bills now. We're using our savings account and at an alarming rate, and we've got to start thinking of either revenues or budget cuts. And the other concern I have is this money we use to increase this then takes away from other projects. I've been trying to communicate that to different people, but I'll let you address that though, Jason, if you would.
Mr. Chairman, so
thank you.
Again, Account 3 was set up in 2005, and it was infused with money from Account 1 and I think other funds at that point through the legislature. And it gets 0.5% of that severance tax or severance revenue that's capped at $155 million. So it only gets $775,000 a year. But it's increased over the years because we get the interest on that account as well. So it was up to 170 plus million at one point. And with the projects that we currently have appropriated dollars for, there's $63 million left in Account 3 in round numbers. So we're not asking for a direct appropriation or any other further dollars into the program. This is money that was set aside by the legislature and previous governors, I suppose, as well. Envisioning we're going to use this money to build reservoirs. And that's what we're trying to do, and we've got enough money in the account to do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Jason, how are the water rights filed, or are the water rights currently filed in the name of the state or the Watershed Improvement District? Who ultimately, if they own the facility, I'm assuming they're going to have the water rights.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. They have not been filed yet, but they will be filed in the name of the district.
Right now, are we looking at any minimum pool requirements under the permit?
Well, we have a conservation pool of 2,000 acre feet, and I don't think it's considered inviolate in the permit at this point. Again, we don't have a 404 permit yet for this. And there were some discussions with Game and Fish and some of the impacts and potential mitigation that they would like to see is if we get into situations in dry years where you are affecting Paint Rock Creek, for example, which is a pretty good trout fishery, that maybe you could release some of that water to build that up. And so I don't think it will be an inviolate pool, but it also won't be meant for irrigation. It'll be meant for environmental or recreational purposes.
Any other questions?
Chairman, so start to finish, we've been working on this a long time. I remember going out, I've been around long enough, I remember going out there and getting out and looking at all this and realizing how much we were taking water for granted in the far west when I looked at our situation out there. How long from start to finish should this go through that you're going to have everything underway? From this very start that you started this into when you finish it up and we got water?
Well, I believe it was probably the fall, winter of 2007 when I first met some of the folks over here, and we were talking about forming a steering committee because we were looking at the entire Millwood watershed, which is pretty large, and different folks have different issues and opportunities up there. So that's when we started, and at this point, knowing we've had to go through this additional geotech work, we would have liked to have started design probably earlier this spring, but we won't move forward with that design until we get through the legislative session, assuming we're successful here today. And then complete the commensurate mitigation plan. It'll be 2021 before we have the design done, and we'll probably go under construction in 2022 with a 2-year time frame for construction, 2 seasons. So be online and filling the reservoir, and where do we end up there? 2024, I think? 2023, 2024. So
Cheers.
do the math there, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, would you indulge me to ask one more question?
I'll let you have one more. Thank you.
So what's the breakdown on regulation and garbage, as I call it, as opposed to construction and actually building a dam? I know that and take the design and all of that, put that into the construction, but the NEPA evaluations and the regulations and more regulations and all of what you cut through.
The NEPA process itself, I think we appropriated originally, it was $4 million, but roughly half and half for NEPA and half for final design. So a couple $1 million for NEPA. We've still got some discretionary tasks there, and we haven't spent all that budget through the third-party NEPA contractor. I don't have in my head exactly how much of that we've spent. But we also know we need to work through, like we mentioned, stream quantification tool and finish the compensatory mitigation plan and adaptive management plans, and that'll continue into the future, affecting the district as well, because they'll have to monitor that for 5 years after it's built to make sure water quality isn't being affected, the E. coli situation that I mentioned earlier. And that'll be an expense, and hopefully they can get some funding through the 319 program to help out with that and work with the local conservation district. But so I don't know if that answered your questions. I'm not sure I can actually
I think you can't
parse out
answer it just
in the
yet.
final design what was associated with stipulations and things. But
Mr. Chairman, I guess it sounds better than what the Pathfinder modification was, but that was like $2 million in construction and $11 million in regulation and such. But thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Over here.
Yeah, how many acres, maybe percentage-wise, are actually going to be above the dam that landowners maybe have claimed to be part of the district? Is there a percentage of what's below and what's above the dam? Are landowners buying up above for exchange of use? Is there any idea of maybe getting more above the dam that might exchange?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, maybe I'll let our engineer give you some exact numbers, but this project is relatively far down in the drainage, so, and also our drainage was settled first at the lower end, so all the senior water rights are down at the lower end. So once this reservoir's in place, the reservoir water will be satisfying those senior water rights, enabling the people above the reservoir to use the run of the river water to use for their junior water rights, so that we have a number of shares in the reservoir that are above the reservoir that will be using it as an exchange program. The exact numbers I don't know. Maybe Mark has an idea on it.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we have those numbers with us today, but there is that.
Yeah, thinking about it, just thinking about your district, you probably have roughly 30% of the district is up above the reservoir, I would think. In terms of exact acres, Mr. Chairman, again, I just don't have those numbers with me in terms of the exchange potential, but that is something that is evaluated as part of the project, and understanding there will be exchanges.
I just had one comment. Who named the reservoir Alkali? And is it not on the Norwood River?
Mr. Chairman, it's on Alkali Creek, which is a tributary to Paint Rock Creek. So that gets back to the NEPA and an off-channel intermittent stream, and so it's just named after the creek. Maybe we should name it.
If they like the name, I'm tickled to death. Thank you.
I lobby that it be eventually called Mullins Reservoir, because he's the person that came to us originally with the idea.
I think it's Mike Besson's fault.
Is there any other comments or questions that our board has here, commissioners? If not, thank you, John, and your district representatives that showed up today. Good luck with your funding, and look forward to building another reservoir in the state of Wyoming. I think that's a classic act if we can do it.
Chairman, I have something to ask. I'm not too sure if it really has anything to do with the reservoir, but how many cuttings do you guys get? You guys grow alfalfa, grass hay? Get 3?
Yep, we get 3.
Well, that's pretty good down there, so, yep. I just wanted to know, so, thanks.
If we have enough water, we get a third cutting.
Good luck with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, do you want to handle these as a block then as well?
Do.
Okay. Okay, so the next one, Levitt Reservoir Expansion, is under tab J. We have John Ed Anderson here from Shell Valley Watershed Improvement District, who's a sponsor of this project. I'm not going to be as long-winded on this because I would repeat myself as far as benefits and everything else. But so once we kind of had the situation we were dealing with for Alkali Creek, we quickly got on the phone with our engineers for Levitt and wanted to make sure that we were okay with our cost estimate there. And so this is RJH Consultants, they took another look at that. And there were some cost increases. The original, again, the vintage of the original cost estimate was 2015 when we were finishing up our feasibility study. And then we asked for, at the time in 2017, $41 million to construct the reservoir. And then since then, we've got our design consultant on board. We've gone through NEPA, so on and so forth, similar to Alkali Creek. And we did have some changes in design. We went, again, from that inclined intake to a tower inlet. But we did see some cost savings as well. And we also increased unit costs similar to what we were talking about at Alkali Creek, just from what we're seeing for bid prices. But we had some cost savings and maybe some value engineering and methods of construction and where we were getting material from and lessening haul distances and things like that. So a less significant impact for sure on Levitt Reservoir. But we did come back with, we felt like, I can't remember the exact number, but we determined that $5 million would be a conservative number and probably a good number to get us to a point. So that takes us up to $46 million total, add $5 million to the 41. And this one, we're anticipating, so again, we've got permits, and we've gone through the compensatory mitigation plan on this and finished that because we didn't have the geotechnical questions here like we did on Alkali Creek, so that didn't slow us up. The EIS was completed back in May again. We got the record of decisions both from the BLM and the Corps of Engineers in October of this year, so hot off the press, and we've got those permits in hand ready to sign. So we're in good shape to move forward. So we've actually told our design consultant, get moving when we saw that that was going to be inevitable with those permits. So they're into some of the design work at this point, and we're hoping to be done with that design near the end of the year so we can bid the project at the end of 2019 and then have a contractor ready to start moving, I'm sorry, not 2019, 2020, end of 2020, next year. So a year from a month or so ago. So late fall next year, we'll have the final designs done. And then going into next winter of 2021, we would bid that project out and have a contractor on board come April, as soon as we can get out there and start moving dirt. Everything's thawed out. And it, again, would be a 2-year construction season. So here we're looking at 2021, 2022 construction, 2023 start filling the reservoir. And it's a 6,600 acre foot reservoir. We're calling it an expansion. Again, we visited this in 2015. We're actually moving that dam upstream, so it's a new reservoir, but we call it an expansion because we're expanding the existing 643 acre feet of storage they've got now. And it's going to have the potential to serve 15,000+ acres. And then, again, benefit cost ratio, the latest one that we've pulled together using that same discount rate, we're looking at a 2.57 benefit cost ratio. So the cost right now we're using is $46 million, and we're expecting $118.25 million of total benefits. The total public benefits are almost $79 million, so well over the entire construction process and even further over what we're asking for grant. But again, getting back to the grant loan, same situation. The district spoke to their membership, figured out what the ability to pay was. In this case, it was $25 an acre foot. And again, that would go to pay the loan and still have money for operation and maintenance. So I've told them from day one as well, once we've figured out what's available and what's affordable, if the cost goes up, which we're asking for another $5 million, their ability to pay stays the same. So I'm asking for that to be put into the grant dollars, and it would end up being a 96.3% grant, 3.7% loan to keep them at that $25 an acre foot assessment. And we had the question before about a maintenance account. We actually somewhat show that in this application of putting those assessments away for a couple years and building that up right before the reservoir is built. And they're anticipating it would add around $225,000 to that account on what they already have sitting in there. Because Shell Valley's been around since, what, then?
86.
86.
Since when? Did you catch that?
And I maybe would ask if there's any questions, and we have the...
I have one. With a project like this, how do we assure ourselves that we are going to get, or that you will get your loan prepayment? You don't, you just rely on the people that are there. You don't assess valuation on their property. It doesn't change their tax structure. It's just that they pay so much per acre foot for their water, correct?
Yes, Chairman Zucker. John Anderson here with Shell Valley Watershed Improvement District. We constructed Adelaide Dam with your help in about 1985, 86. And that's how we have done that, is charged them assessment on an acre foot of water. So one share is 1 acre foot of water. So the $25, say you have 100 shares of the new reservoir water, your assessment would be $2,500. Does that answer your question?
It does, but, and they're assured that they have to pay. Now, they don't pay. Do you have the ability to assess the property in any facet for that payment?
Yes, through the statute of Wyoming, or the watershed improvement districts, we are allowed to do that through our budgeting process, through the county assessor, and, yeah.
Good,
So-
thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have one. Do you have a commitment on how many acres presently? Do you have, is it 7,000 plus, and or?
That is acres or acre feet?
Acre feet. And acres would be I'd like to know that too.
I think the acres is in this 15,000 plus, about. We put together, the district has put together a little chart here on ditches, and those people willing to pursue water. And right now, we're a little bit over. We're like at 4,855 acre feet. Of that 6,600, part of that is the existing pool of 600 acre feet. So those people won't be helping us build a thing, but they will be helping us we will be assessing them for O&M on their 600 acre feet. And the 1,500 acre feet for public benefit or wildlife, there's no assessment on that.
A follow-up. So what if you have a guy that does use his acre feet? How, everybody pays the same, but you have some that don't use it one year. How do you, is there a carryover for the next year so that guy will be shorted? Or does he pay $1 extra? Or how do you deal with that?
Representative Larson, I think that's a good question for you. You work for the state engineer's office. Doesn't, at the end of the irrigation season, that starts over, I believe.
Okay, but that doesn't help your group that has the water rights in there. I mean, it's if one guy uses it, he kind of penalizes the others because it won't be there for the next year.
Well, I guess we're assuming that on a full fill every year, so.
Okay.
Chairman, Jason, this would be more of a question for you, but just having some experience with these reservoirs. What was the hydrology, I guess, on both of them? Are we looking at trying to model the hydrology for 8 out of 10 years? I mean, that's the that's within the criteria. They have to meet that 8 out of 10, I believe. But what did the hydrology show that the likelihood these are going to fill?
Mr. Chairman, on Levitt Reservoir, it was about 3,600 acre feet, 8 out of 10 years. And we've got an active additional capacity of 4,461. So it's pretty good. On Alkali Creek, we built that one as big as we could in the draw we could build it in. And so it's almost 100%. That 6,000, I think, is, I want to say 5,500 or 5,700 of 80% yield, 8 out of 10 years. So Paint Rock Creek is a pretty prolific stream. Beaver Creek, not so much. You're catching that peak, but they're both pretty good.
Well, and just the reason I asked the question is when High Savory was constructed, it was anticipated to fill 8 out of 10 years, and at least in the 13 going on 14 years of operation, we're filling it about 6 out of 10 years. So the point that I'm trying to get to, if you can get to 110% of a hydrology, that's way better than trying to cut the line at 80-10, because I think it gets back to the questions I think Representative Larson asked earlier. You're paying whether that water fills up or not, and it's always a concern that when we model these things and we say it's going to fill 8 out of 10 years and it really only fills 6 out of 10, and you're paying for all that water that never filled up in that reservoir. So I just think going forward, the more that we can try to design these where they're 100, like you said, with the alkali, think of us, Paint Rock Creek, there's way more yield than there is to storage capacity. Those are the good sites.
And Mr. Chairman, I would just respond to that. High Savory, the first 10 years we operated it, we filled it every year and thought we should have built this thing bigger. And then it was 4 years we didn't fill it. So, and that gets just to the point of climate variability and the extremes we're seeing now. And yeah, we should store as much water as we possibly can. But we do go through an exercise of looking at our hydrologic modeling and what's the yield, and okay, if you build it bigger to try to get that 100%, or you'd actually build it smaller to get 100% yield, but if you build it bigger, where's the trade-off of you're kind of wasting money and not really getting the return? So we do go through those exercises and try to find the maximum potential with the good as data as we have, so.
This is quite unique that we have two major reservoirs built in one county. That is unique. Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a question concerning the difference between assessed acres and irrigated acres. Because under pre-project, there's 5,000 assessed acres, post-project 7,000 plus assessed acres, but in both cases, the number of irrigated acres are over 15,000. So I just wonder why there's all those irrigated acres that are not being assessed.
That goes back to the Watershed Improvement District statute, that we only assess those that are benefited. So of this list that I have here with 160 potential users, those are the ones that we will assess.
Okay.
And that will be by the acre foot, not irrigated acres.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? With that, thank you for your presentation. Good luck on your reservoir. We'll see if we can find the money.
Just one note, we started this in 2006 with the water study as just a dream. When they mentioned NEPA, I was scared plumb to death we'd never survive that, but we have, and issued a 404 permit here recently, so at this time next year, we're hoping to bid this thing and maybe make it one of the top 10 and 10 reservoirs that Governor Meade had suggested. So, thank you.
Thank you, and another thing, hurry and get it built, because the cost will go up.
Time's money.
Time's money is right.
Mr. Chairman, the last project in the Account 3 list of recommendations is a Sheridan Supplemental Storage Project. And if you recall, I don't remember exactly what year the legislation was, 5 years ago, this coming July 1st, so I guess it was 2015. Can that be accurate? Doesn't seem that long ago. But what this was looking at was, at the time, they had looked at various potential water sources for Sheridan and Saws and looked at building new reservoirs, and came quickly to the realization that if we've got existing storage on the mountain already and trying to go through the NEPA process on a new reservoir, knowing there's existing storage, obviously that's the least environmentally damaging alternative, is to go by existing storage. So we, Sheridan and Saws and the studies that Water Development worked through, determined which reservoir would be the cheapest and least amount of, I guess, deferred maintenance and things of that nature of the reservoirs that had some water available to them. And Park Reservoir was the one, and they set a dollar amount, or I should say an acre foot amount that they kind of had a goal of purchasing, and that was 2,000 acre feet. And I can hand it over to Dan from Sheridan here, but in just a second he can talk to you about how that's been going. But it's basically on a willing seller, willing buyer basis. When they come up, they approach these folks and talk to them. And long story short, this is just really an extension of the reversion date on that appropriation for an additional 5 years. So with that, I would ask if there's any questions and hand it over to Dan.
Thank you, Mr. No questions. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission and,
Mr. Chairman, I'll ask the question. How much have you procured so far, or got commitments for?
just 107 acre feet to date. That's been in the last 15 months. So the first several years, we were, really didn't have a lot of success in trying to move the process forward on our own and trying to be diligent about it. And acquiring water, we found it takes time and diligence to do that. Finding willing buyers, and so we hired the city and SAWS hired a water broker, basically a local engineering firm that is kind of serving in that capacity for us. And since then, we've had a lot more success because they're putting the consistent contacts and diligence forward and putting before us willing sellers. So we've had some success in the past year, and we think that time will breed more. If anything, we're hopeful that at least we've exhausted that possibility for us, and that's really what we're trying to accomplish. Can we buy stored water? Is it available? And if we need to go build new storage, it just supports that cause that we've done the due diligence to do that.
Mr. Chairman, to follow up, what's the water being used for now? I mean, I know what it was, 30 years ago what it was being used for, but with all the development, is there, I guess, excess water over ag demands in the area now, or are we just trading uses from ag to municipal?
I would say a little bit of both. There is some excess water. I won't really speak for the ag community, but there is a lot of ag water that's not being put to use for that purpose. And also, Sheridan is growing and progressing in a lot of ways westward, which gets into the ag land that is supported by this drainage. And so development is now looking to convert a lot of that to a developed property and to a municipal style of use.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the commission?
I'd move, we move.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Good luck.
Mr. Chairman, building reservoirs is not for the weak of heart. But anytime you have 404 permits, you better build them. So I would move that we approve the Account 3 funding for the WWDO recommendations.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Purcell, seconded by Yankee. Bill, Commissioner Yankee? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Mr. Chairman, could I say one other quick thing? And it's just a matter of if Select Water Committee members here today support these ideas, if you could find it during the legislative session to do whatever you can to support these projects. It would be greatly appreciated by the folks that showed up today.
Chairman?
You have the floor.
Select Water Committee's never had a problem supporting this. It's the House Appropriations Committee that's had a problem with supporting it, just for the record.
Well, we may have to support you anyway, you guys, because we're going to go after the dollars, remember, that we talked about yesterday? Probably, or we'll try. So we'll be down here, let us know when a good time is for legislature, and we'll come down and support you if we can. Okay?
Thank you.
Next item of business. Where are we at?
We're done.
That's it.
We're done. Is there any other items to come before?
No, I didn't know if there was a couple that we could pick off from tomorrow to speed it up, or we can wait to do them all tomorrow.
We have to wait for sponsors.
Right, but there's a couple that are.
I've got a call, get enough to drink.
Is there some that we would not need sponsors or attendance? If there are, I guess we could do that. It's
I
the
see,
preference of the commission. We can do it.
yeah, I see at least two, W-2, the sponsors contingency fund account, and
V2 also, small water. These two. That- those are
V2 and W2 and C3. And Laprelle, are they gonna be back? It's entirely up to you. We can do it
Are these
tomorrow.
just formalities, or will they take discussionary?
Mr. Chairman, I think they're just formalities, and we're not going to save that much time by
Yeah.
taking the 3 minutes now versus the 3 minutes tomorrow.
Yeah, I agree, so we'll leave the agenda as it is.
Very well, thank you.
With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
I make so moved.
Commissioner Lancaster did that?
Second.
And too much lunch.
Commissioner Little, seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, motion carried. We're adjourned.
I started to get up and leave.
9 hours in me.
You were, and I tried to pull you
Still
back.
got 9 hours in me.
Pull back very far, did I?